Okay, discuss about learning. We should have the base of Migdash immediately in its place. And also for Shleima for for Yechiel Nassim Ben Sarah. We start a new parak. This is it changes gears a little bit. You know, like on the bicycle, when you change gears, it's a different, almost like a different author. Let's see. Yoma Kippurim, it's on page Ayin Gimel Amud Beis 73b. Yom Kippur, Aser B'Achila, L'B'Shtia, B'Rechitza, B'Sicha, V'Nil Sasandal, V'Tash B'Shamita. On Yom Kippur, it's prohibited to eat and drink. Those go together as one category. I'm going to say 5 things that are prohibited. Eating and drinking goes together. There's 1. Washing, that's like bathing. Sicha means to put on lotions. So, Benila Sasandal, which means leather shoes. And Tash Mishamita, and marital relations. Those are the 5 prohibited activities on Yom Kippur. The king is supposed to look nice, and the bride also supposed to look nice. I'm not sure if Rashi's saying it's 30 days before the chuppah or 30 days after the chuppah. Sounds like after the chuppah. 30 days after the chuppah, that would make sense. A bride, she's considered a bride the first 30 days of marriage. She's allowed to wash her face. And a woman that just gave birth, a sandal, she's allowed to wear shoes. We don't want her feet to get cold. She has to be taken care of better. Divri Rabbi Eliezer, that's the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. He is common to have a unique opinion in Mishnayos. Chacham say no. That's going on everyone. They say that a king and a bride and a woman that gave birth are not allowed to do those activities. It's in Kippur. If someone eats a large date, you know the dates, like module, the module dates, much better than the other ones. No, those big dates, the soft dates. The size of the date plus the size of the pit that's inside. In other words, if you actually ate the date, you'd be exempt because you didn't eat the pit. We're talking about the size of the date, including the pit. That's the size that's prohibited to eat on Yom Kippur. Usually we say it kazayas. But on Yom Kippur we don't say kazayas because it doesn't say on Yom Kippur don't eat. It would have said loy seichal or something. So then we would say achila is kazayas, like it says matzah. How much matzah do you say? Kazayas, that's achila. But it doesn't say that. It says to afflict the soul. So how much food would not be afflicting the soul? It's already a portion that would be satisfying, nourishing. Okay. Someone drinks a cheekful of liquid. So he's also chayav. When we say chayav, we mean that he's either chayav a karban, if it's shege, or he's chayav karis, if it's b'mezid. Karis, it's excision. Punishment that comes from heaven. All foods will combine to be the measurement of a large date, and all liquids will combine to be the measurement of a cheekful. Yeah, I think some Rabbanim tell if someone is supposed to eat on Yom Kippur, so they say, well, try to eat less than a cheekful, less than a date, and try to have a drink less than a cheekful. How much is a cheekful? So I don't know. Before Yom Kippur, take a cheekful, spit it out, see where it goes, and that's the cheekful. No, they actually have a measurement also that's like a standard. But okay. Things that have different measurements don't combine. So if he has half a kaisevis, half a large date of food, and half a cheekful of water together, it doesn't combine to either the cheekful or the date because of different measurements. They can't combine. Right? Eating food will combine with the other food. That will combine. The herring with the cracker, that's the combination. And the coffee with the milk, that combines.
Together, but like, it's also the same if you eat them separate, right?
Even if you eat them separate, as long as you don't have the time of eating, it's combined in a certain amount of time.
Like half a day in the morning, half a day in the afternoon, if you like it.
So that we're going to see if you're allowed to. That's a good point. Menachem Mendel is suggesting that maybe you should be allowed to eat a half a date in the morning. That's actually our Gemara here. We'll see in definitely rabbinic law tells us that you can't. What about biblical law? Let's see. So the Gemara starts off with Asr. We said Yom Kippurim, it's Asr to do these things. It's prohibited to do these things. It's forbidden. It's much more than forbidden. It's Anush Karasu. It's a very serious prohibition. It incurs karas. It should say chayiv karas. It shouldn't just say prohibited. Prohibited sounds like, don't do it. This is, when the penalty is like together with it. It's missing the emphasis. Rab Ila, Vitim Rab Yirmiyah Leinitzcha Ela L'Chatzishir. The Gemara is actually talking about Chatzishir. The Mishnah is talking about Chatzishir. Chatzishir means half the measurement. You know why we said the word prohibited, and we didn't say that it's chayiv? Because we were talking about if someone eats less than the amount, less than the share, that's when it's prohibited, and he's not chayiv. So in other words, those measurements that we gave, that would be the measurement of chayiv kares. But less than the measurement, it's still prohibited. And that's what our Mishnah is talking about. The Gemara says, well, it's a good answer, but only according to one opinion. That's good according to the opinion that says that when the Torah says that you're not allowed to do such and such a thing. And there's a measurement, how much you're not allowed to eat or whatever. So, and you did less than that measurement, the Torah also prohibits it. So what's the measurement for? That's only to tell you when there's a penalty, when there's a punishment. It's sort of like speeding. I mean, you can't speed, but you don't get a ticket until it's a little bit more than that, right? Unless they really don't like it. So there's like a shear that's for the punishment, and then there's a shear for the law. What the law? The law is 30 miles, whatever. So it's after even before. It's just there's no ticket. There's no punishment. So according to that opinion, that we understand what it says. But according to the opinion that says that it's mutter, less than the measurement is mutter, as you were suggesting, and maybe it should be allowed. So why does the Mishnah not say that there's a chiyuv kares? There is no time when it's aser and not chayav. According to this opinion, if it's aser, it's automatically chayav. If it's not chayav, then it's not aser. Dietmar, as it was stated by Amirayim, Chatzi Shir, when it comes to half a measurement, this is a very general discussion here. Half a measurement, it's not only in Kippur, talking about every prohibition in the Torah. Can you have a small amount of pig or milk and meat, less than the measurement? It's just going to be a small taste. Chatzi Shir, Rabbi Yechanan Amar Asam and Atayr, Reish Lakish Amar Mutam and Atayr. It's a machlekes Rabbi Yechanan Reish Lakish. Early Amirayim in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yechanan, how do you remember that Rabbi Yechanan is one that says chayav? That's the test. Rabbi Yechanan, he said holds chayav. Reish Lakish, shari. Shari is Aramaic or permitted. So he says that it's mutter minater. So Hanichel Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that says that Chatzi Shir is Chayev. Then good, we have a pshat in the Mishnah why it says Aser, because we're talking about less than a Shir, and it's also Aser. But according to Hanichel Rabbi Yochanan, that says that it's Aser. El Reish Lakish Ma'iklam Meimar, but according to Reish Lakish, how are we going to explain the Mishnah? Gemara says, Ma'ida Reish Lakish, Aser Midrabanan. Reish Lakish agrees that it's rabbinically prohibited. This discussion that we were just having with Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, that's a discussion only about biblical law. Rabbinic law, everyone agrees it's going to be prohibited. So back to your suggestion, we should be allowed to eat half a day in the morning of Yom Kippur. Rabbinic law, according to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, is prohibited. Question is, what about biblical law? So Rabbi Yochanan would say it's prohibited, even though it's less than a measurement, and according to Reish Lakish, would say no, biblical law allows it. So Ihachi, the Gemara is going to take us through a little bit of a discussion here, challenging this assertion that we just made that Reish Lakish says that it's prohibited rabbinically. There's a little bit of an issue with this. Reish Lakish didn't say that it's. We're saying that Reish Lakish says that it's rabbinically prohibited to have a half a measurement. The Gemara is going to challenge that. We don't have that in Reish Lakish's words, so someone suggesting that, the Gemara is suggesting that to answer the Mishnah, which would mean now, according to this pshat, Yom Kippurim Aser B'Achilu Shtia is all rabbinic law. Yeah, that's what would come out, according to the Reish Lakish. It says, if that's the case, you shouldn't be chayev at karban if the person violates an oath. Let's see what the case is. Alama Tanan, why was it taught in the Mishnah? If someone takes an oath that he's not going to eat today, and he ended up eating you see if someone takes an oath that he's not going to do something that the Torah prohibits, so the oath is nothing because it was prohibited anyway. He takes an oath that I'm not going to eat treif. So we don't need your oath. You're not allowed to eat treif. The oath would only be because then he's gonna. So I'm not gonna keep. I was mouthing it. An oath is only something significant if it was something that you were allowed to do and you're accepting on yourself that you're not going to do it anyway. So here, there's a little bit of an issue. The Chachamim say, or the first opinion says over here, someone takes an oath that he's not going to eat nevela and treif, and then he goes ahead and he eats nevela and treif. It says he's chayev. How could he be chayev? Chayev a karban shvua is chayev for other things. He ate treif, but the karban that you bring for an oath, that he shouldn't be chayev. We have to see in the Gemara. Reb Shimon we understand. Rahavinan ba. Havinan means we deliberated on this. Heavy to exist. We stopped and we pondered this. Rahavinan ba. Amai chayev. Mushba vayman mehar Sinai. Why is he chayev? He took an oath by Mount Sinai that he's not going to eat treif. We all did. So, and then he goes ahead and he takes another oath. He's already sworn in. He's already sworn that he's not going to do this. So Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, Damni Bekel Dvar Mamatarmin Dvar Masurim. The reason why the oath takes effect is because when he took the oath, he said, I'm not going to eat kosher or treif. And then he went ahead and he ate treif. Now, since the oath was valid, because he included items that were permitted, so the oath takes effect. Once the oath takes effect, nigu, just as the oath takes effect for permitted food, it also takes effect on the other food. That's the pshat in this, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rav, and Shmuel. Team up over here. Rish Lakish, it's called, well, there's two terms that are used here. Mitaych. It's not, it's kailel.
When Reb Shimon says potter, is he saying potter on the shvua? When Reb Shimon says potter, is he saying potter on the shvua or potter for eating?
No, potter on the shvua. Potter on the shvua, yeah.
But on treifus, he's going to be chayev.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't go away. Yeah, these are vows that could be nullified. A person can annul the vow that he takes, but not if he can't annul the first vow that he took when we were all becoming Jewish. Okay, you want to see more about the Nigu? Look in the Rashi B'Koilam, the last words. It's about 5 lines from the bottom of the page. B'Koilam. Nigu B'Koilam, just Nigu, just as. It's not the Nigu if you wanted to lie, you want to. It's the word Nigu and since, or just as. Okay, so Rish Lakish Amar, Rish Lakish says, Iyat Maitzi Ela b'mefarish katzi shir v'alibud Rabbanan, Ay b'stam v'alibud Rabbi Akiva, Damar Eiser Atzmai b'kolsh, Damar Adam Eiser Atzmai b'kolsh. On top of the page, let me explain what's happening over here. The Torah, when it prohibits food, when it prohibits us to eat non-kosher food, there's a certain measurement for that. Kazayas. What about when a person takes an oath and he says, I'm not going to eat? Does he also mean a kazayas? So whatever a person means when he says, I'm not going to eat, what does he mean? I'm not going to eat cake. When he says, you see him eating cake, it's less than a shia. So probably today we would assume that when he says he's not going to eat cake, he's not going to eat cake. It means even the smallest amount, right?
By the way, Rabbi Smith's birthday is on Shabbos.
So less than a shia. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rabbi Akiva's view is that when a person takes a vow, he's referring to anything. Oh, that was a vow that we're going to accept the Torah and what the Torah prescribed. That's a proscribed. Here, and then there's another opinion. There's the rabbi's opinion. The rabbis say that no. Really, when a person takes a vow, he's not going to eat. He really means a shear of eating. However, if he says specifically, I'm not going to eat anything, even less than a shear, then the vow takes effect. He specified that's what the vow is. Whatever he specified, that's what the vow is. So we have two options, according to Rish Lakish. Either it's specified less than a shear when he took the vow, or he's not specifying it, but a vow is more strict than the Torah law. The Torah law would only be prohibiting non-kosher food from a shear. Because he took a vow, it's more than that. Basically, what's happening here is Rish Lakish is looking for a way where the Torah was allowing it, and he is taking the vow on himself. Look what's happening. He takes a vow, I'm not going to eat treif, according to Rish Lakish saying, according to Rabbi Akiva, or according to the Rabbanan. I'm not going to eat less than a shear of treif, even less than a shear of treif, according to the Rabbanan. He specified even less than a shear. Now, was that prohibited, according to the Torah, before the vow? Rish Lakish holds that it wasn't prohibited. So the vow is effective. Now we have a problem. This was the basic question that we bring in. The problem is that the Gemara earlier suggested to answer the Mishnah that Rish Lakish agrees that it's rabbinically prohibited. Now, if every rabbinic law, the reason why we keep the rabbinic law is because the Torah tells us that you have to keep rabbinic law. If that's the case, then really less than a shear was also prohibited rabbinically, which ultimately is prohibited biblically because you have to follow rabbinic law. If that's the case, so how is the shvuah chal? How does the oath take effect? It was prohibited anyway, because rabbinic law prohibits it. You follow? You get the question. We can't say that Rish Lakish agrees that it's prohibited rabbinically, because then the oath wouldn't have taken effect, and we say that the oath does take. Rish Lakish's explanation for the oath taking effect is that it's less than a measurement. That means that he holds that it's absolutely permitted, according to the Torah, to eat non-kosher, less than the measurement. And he's prohibiting because of the oath. The Gemara says, "V'chitema." Maybe you can answer this and say, "Given this lehetem in a Torah kachal karban shvuah." Maybe you want to say, "Well, I get it. What you're saying that it's rabbinically prohibited, and there's a biblical law that requires you to keep rabbinic law. The Torah says that you have to keep anything the rabbis tell you, say you have to follow. I get that. But maybe we can say that the shvuah will take effect on something that's prohibited rabbinically, because it's not prohibited. It's where the shvuah would take effect on would not take effect on something that was prohibited biblically. But maybe we can make a distinction and say that because it's only prohibited rabbinically, the oath that he's taking is going to take effect on, even though it's prohibited rabbinically, because it's permitted biblically. Maybe we can make that distinction. It says that no, you can't make that distinction, as we'll see in a moment. You want to ask something?
Yeah, because you said before that anything that's prohibited rabbinically is actually prohibited
Biblically, yeah. So, but there is a difference. I mean, there is a difference. There's a lot to discuss. I mean, this is huge discussions in yeshiva. There's a machlekes the Rambam and the Ramban in the Sefer HaMitzvahs. If really every rabbinic law is really prohibited biblically or not. The Ramban says it's not necessarily so. The Rambam says it is so. The Ramban holds only interpretation of text. It's rabbinic interpretation of text it's a biblical law to follow, but not the decrees that the rabbis make and all of that. But that wouldn't be relevant to this. The other discussion here is what aspect this the Meshech Chochmah discusses. The biblical law to follow rabbinic law is not specific in any way. I don't have a biblical law to wash my hands before I eat bread because the rabbi said that I have to. I have a general rule to follow what the rabbis say. I'm fulfilling a general rule. I'm not fulfilling the washing the hands all of a sudden became biblical, right? So there still is a distinction in if it's like a specific rule or if it's like just a general rule to follow all rabbinic law. The problem with this is, if you want to make a distinction, is about Tanan, we have a mission that says like this. If someone has administered an oath, do you know testimony about such and such a thing? And he happens to know testimony, but he lies about it. Now, if his testimony would have been valid, so then he has to bring a sacrifice here. Yeah. He has to bring a sacrifice because he lied. That he refrained from giving testimony. He lied under oath. But that's only if his testimony would have been accepted. We asked on that. Lamuti Mai. In the Mishnah previously, it said that this doesn't apply to women or people that can't testify anyway, children. So we said this only applies to people that are eligible to testify. We asked, well, you just said who's eligible to testify. Who else are you excluding with this that it wouldn't apply to? So Rav Papa Amar Lamute Mela, the king is not supposed to go and testify. We don't take testimony from a king. We don't testify about the king. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Amar Lamute Mesachek B'Kuvya. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says it's coming to exclude someone that plays dice. The gangsters play dice. Oh boy. You just put the whole world on the gangsters. Cubes. Kuvya is cube, like rummy cube. Cube. It's the Aramaic for dice. Cube. Masachik b'kuvya. They gamble, and there's a question why is gambling ruin someone's eligibility to testify, whatever the case is. It's only rabbinic. And look at what's happening here. The Gemara says, but a gambler or someone that plays dice biblically can testify. So biblically, his testimony should be accepted. And he just lied. And you're telling me that he's exempt from the korban because his testimony won't be accepted rabbinically. But Rabbanan the pastor, it's only rabbinic. And still he doesn't have. So you see, there's no difference between a rabbinic prohibition and a biblical prohibition. Both of them, when it comes to a korban about an oath, both of them are exactly the same. We say this guy's exempt because rabbinically we don't accept his testimony anyway, even though he just lied, but so what? His testimony is worthless because he gambles. And so the same thing should apply before. If you want to tell me that when the guy took the oath, that he's not going to eat treif, he was talking about less than a shear, which is only rabbinically prohibited. Less than a shear is rabbinically prohibited, according to the way we explain Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish is going to explain that so what, that it's rabbinically prohibited, but biblically it's permitted, and therefore the oath takes effect on non-kosher food because it was biblically permitted. But you see over here that there's no difference between rabbinic and biblical. Yeah. With regard to sacrifices that need to be. The Gemara says, "Shani Yasam Damakrem La Yagid V'Hailav Baragadahu Klal." The Gemara gives an answer. It says you don't really have a proof that you can't differentiate between rabbinic and biblical law because of what you just said. You know why? Because over there it was, what would the results be from your testimony? Now, biblically, doesn't matter. What I need is the actual outcome. An actual outcome is the rabbinic law would say that we're not going to accept the testimony. So therefore, we don't obligate the person to bring a sacrifice for not testifying because the outcome would have been there. So it doesn't matter if it's a biblical law that affects the outcome or a rabbinic law that affects the outcome. Over there, we needed the outcome. We needed a testimony that would be effective, and you don't have it. Over here, it's not I need an outcome. I'm taking an oath. Is the oath effective on something that's already prohibited? The answer is no. Now, if it's already prohibited rabbinically, then it's prohibited rabbinically, and the oath shouldn't be effective. So that would be a problem. Unless we can differentiate. What the Gemara is leaving off with us, that we're leaving off, is that it is possible to differentiate. That over here, there's no difference rabbinic and biblical, but by the other, there is a difference between biblical and rabbinical. And what that's going to leave us is an answer that it's possible that Reish Lakish holds. Let's go back. The Mishnah, according to Reish Lakish, is Yom Kippurim Asur B'Achilu Shtia. It's rabbinically prohibited to eat less than a shear. We have a problem that how does the oath take effect unless the Nashir, if he takes an oath that I'm not going to eat treif, it's rabbinically prohibited. We said, well, there's a difference between rabbinic law and biblical law. There's no difference between biblical law and rabbinic law. That's in a different case. That's where we're holding it. Okay. No, for rabbinic law. Yeah, the punishment would be different, but yeah, that because that's not the issue here. The issue here, this complicated discussion was discussing: is it true that Rish Lakish says that it's rabbinically prohibited to have less than a shear? We thought that Rish Lakish says it's mutter. We thought he meant mutter minatayra and rabbinic. And the Gemara tells me no. Rish Lakish says that it's aser, midrabanan. And we are challenging that. We don't want to accept that Rish Lakish says it's aser midrabanan. We have a proof. We say no. We can answer that proof. We say no. You can't answer that proof. You have a problem. So we said, well, that problem is not a real problem. So the answer remains. Now the Gemara says, we challenged the original assumption that we made. The original assumption here in this Gemara was that if you're saying aser, if you're saying that it's prohibited, that means that there's no punishment. You should have emphasized that there's a punishment. You didn't emphasize the right thing here. You said it's prohibited. Really, you should have said that there's a tzanashkaris. Well, this is why. All the time we do this. We say that it's aser, and there still is a punishment. But Tanya, we have a brisa. We have a brisa that says, I know that there's anashkaris, but we taught aser on other things. So we can say that it's aser even for things that are anashkaris. The Gemara says, whoa, 1 second. That brisa doesn't tell you that when it said aser, prohibited, it was referring to the anashkaris things. Kishamra aser, layamra b'chatzi shir. You have to take that brisa in 2 steps. We said aser, I know that. We were referring to chatzi shir. Aval kashir, it's anashkaris. We have a way of explaining that brisa that it's not saying aser on the things that are actually anashkaris. You want to know the truth? You want to go back and answer the question? Why does the Mishnah say anashkaris? You can go back. You can say kiktani aser ashayra. You know what we're talking about? Not on achila and shtiya. We're talking about trechitza, washing, putting on oils, wearing shoes, tashma shamita. Those are rabbinic. Not those rabbinic. It's machlekes if those are rabbinic or if those are biblical. But they're definitely not anashkaris. The only one that's anashkaris that we've listed here, anashkaris. Punishment is excision. Karis is to cut. They're cut off from the Jewish people. Yeah. So the soul would become severed from its. What does that mean? I think the person dies at 50 or 60. There's a discussion about that. And what is it? You get a haunted house. Yeah. The Alter Rebbe discusses why is it that today people could be high in Paris and they still live for 60. It's a discussion. Basically, he says that if their life was coming from Kedusha, then they would have no more life. But if their life is coming from Klipa, they can still exist. Right? That's the explanation. Okay. So now we say the Tanu Rabba v'Rab Yosef b'Shar Sifri debei Rab. Rabba and Rab Yosef. Rabba and Rab Yosef. The Rosh Hashivas in Pumbedisa. they were learning Shar Sifrei de Rav, the other midrashim of Rav. Other midrashim are referring to the medrash on Bamidbar and Devarim. Sifrei, as opposed to the Sifra. Sifra is the medrash, which is on Vayikra. It's called the Sifra. It's called the Teres Kainim. And the Sifrei, the Sifri, the way you call it, the Sifri is on Bamidbar and Devarim. Rashi calls it Medrash on Vayedaber and on Elah Dvarim. Vayedaber is it's Bamidbar. That's a Rashi calls it Bamidbar. Sefer Bamidbar, call it Vayedaber. Sefer Vayedaber. So they taught in the Medrash on Bamidbar and Dvarim, Minayin li Yom Kippurim Shasa Berachitza V'Sicha V'Nil Sasanda V'Tasha Shemitah. How do you know that those things are prohibited? Tamalei Shabbasin. It says Shabbasin, Shavuos. Shavuos sounds like it's rabbinic. How do you know that we have other laws other than eating and drinking? Because it says the word Shabbasin, the Shabbos in Kippur, and that is an extra word. That comes to tell me that there's other prohibitions also. Just like on Shabbos, we have the 39 malachos, and then you have other things that are prohibited as well. The shvusim. So too on Yom Kippur, you also have other things that are prohibited. Kegufa was taught chatzi shir when it comes to half a measurement. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Asim Menater, Rish Lakish Amar Mutter Menater. We had a machlekes. Is a chatzi shir prohibited? Half a measurement, is it prohibited or is it permissible? It's machlekes Rabbi Yechanan Rish Lakish. Why does Rabbi Yechanan say that it's prohibited? Rabbi Yechanan Amar Asim Menater, given the chazi l'tzteru feisur kachal. You see, it's prohibited because if you have another half, you have a half a kazayas, half an olive size non-kosher. If you have another half, that will complete the prohibition. It can't be that it's permitted. How do you have permitted and then another permitted, and then all of a sudden it becomes prohibited? No. Chazilut tarufe, there's definitely some learning this. But one of the ways is that it's, you see, it's got to be prohibited because if it combines to reach a measurement that incurs a punishment, then it needed to start off prohibited. Rish Lakish says, no, it's permitted. The Torah says, don't eat. You didn't eat. Why didn't you eat? I ate. No, you didn't eat what the Torah calls eating. The Torah never prohibited it. Esri Rabbi Yechanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yechanan asked Rish Lakish a question. Ainly ala kol sheyeshni b'inus. Yeshni ba'asara. Okay, listen to this. You have two verses when it comes to prohibited fat, called chaylev, prohibited fat. One verse says, "Kol chaylev shar v'kesav eis loisei chaylev." Any fat of an ox, of a lamb, of a goat shall not be eaten. It says any fat. That's a prohibition. Don't eat. Then it also says, "Ki kol oichal chaylev min habehema," etc. Anyone that does eat fat from an animal, v'nichrasa, he gets a punishment. So here I have a verse that says any fat of an animal. Now, any is inclusive. Any fat of an animal means even less than a shear. And I have on that any fat of an animal is prohibited. It says it's prohibited. The problem is that then it goes on and it says that because anyone that eats, I'm giving you the answer before the question. By the punishment, it doesn't say anything. It just says kol oichal. That means any person, not any food. So therefore, I only know. Let's go back inside. Rabbi Yechanan asks Rish Lakish. He says like this. Quotes this brisa. Ainli ala kol sheyeshna ba'inus, yeshna ba'asara. I only know that anything that's included in the punishment, which means a shear, because the punishment doesn't tell me kol chelav, the punishment tells me kol oicha. I only know that if there's a shear, then yeshne ba'asara, then it's prohibited. But koi v'chatzi shear, hoyel ve'ina ba'inish, yachal eina ba'asara. I could have thought that a koi or a kvi, the type of animal that we don't know if it's a domesticated animal or a wild animal. Maybe it's like a buffalo or something. We don't know what it is. Now, the difference is that a domesticated animal, a behema, has forbidden fats. A wild animal does not have forbidden fats. The deer, you can eat the fat from the deer. So I could have thought that maybe a koi, which is a doubt, what it is. And also a chatzi shir. Maybe it's totally less than a measurement. Maybe it's permitted. Why? Because I know there's no punishment less than a shir. And it says next to the other that don't eat this. Anyone that does gets the punishment. It would only be the things that are included in the punishment would be included in the prohibition. How do you know that a koi you can't eat the fat? And how do you know that less than a shir you can't eat the fat? Talmud Leimer kol chelav, the quotes a pasuk. The pasuk says kol chelav, any fat. You know what that's telling me? Even less than a shir. Rabbi Yochanan has a strong raya that he's right. Any fat, including less than a shir, is biblically prohibited. Even less than a kazayas. Rish Lakish said that it's permitted. Rabbi Yochanan has a brisa that says brisa is a higher source. The Gemara answers midirabanan cross machzor b'alma. It was only rabbinic. The pasuk kol chelav doesn't really tell me all fat, even less than a shear. That's just what the rabbis are saying to get you to help you remember this law. It's an asmachta, but it's not an actual lima that tells me that the Torah is prohibited. Achinam mistabi, you have to say so. You have to say that it's not a biblical law. Bisal kadaitach deraisa, because if it would enter your mind to say this is a biblical law, kai sveiko. What's the problem with the kai or a kri? It's a doubt. It's a chrolasi sveika. God has a doubt, and so God is saying an extra pasuk to tell me that even though I'm not sure what it is, but you should know it's prohibited. Now, it's possible we don't know. So we have to study more. But God doesn't have to write an extra word for his own doubt. God doesn't have a doubt. So why are you telling me that this is a biblical law that's including a doubt? There is no doubt for God. So it must be that it's only rabbinic law. Gemara says that's not a proof. It's not a proof. If that's the whole proof, then it doesn't. You're not grabbing. You're not taking anything. Kasavri koi beri b'pnei atzmehi. It's not that there's a doubt if it's a domesticated animal, if a buffalo is a domesticated animal, if a buffalo is a wild animal. It's not a doubt. It's what we're saying is that there is a species that's not this and not that. We have to include it. What category are you going to include it into? Because it's not this or not that. You don't say this. All right? He made him an Irish cup.
Yeah.
Hadam Rabbi Baravin, af kol asuye koi sveiko, yitzchroler b'y sveika, elaber yishayni, hachanam ber yishayni. There's another prohibition about blood, and over there, the interesting thing is that blood is prohibited, whether it's a wild animal or whether it's a domesticated animal. Both bloods are prohibited. And then the Gemara says over there that it says kol dam. It's coming to include also blood of a koi. So why do you have to include it? You have to include something that's a doubt. And the answer is that it's a different species. It's not this and not that. It's not that it's a doubt which one it is. It's a different species. Now, over there, if it's a different species, it explains why blood should not be prohibited because it's not this and not that. So therefore, once I say it's a different species, then we'll say also by us it's a different species. And you really don't have a proof that it's rabbinic law, it could be it's biblical law. Okay. Once it's biblical law, then it could be Rabbi Yochanan has a strong proof. But we're not saying that Rabbi Yochanan is correct. We're just saying that your proof that Rabbi Yochanan is correct is not valid. Tana Rabbanan, stood in the Brisa. Should rush through this, or let's go a little further. The Torah doesn't tell us exactly what the affliction is. You should afflict your souls on Yom Kippur. How should you afflict your souls? Yeah, I would have thought afflict your soul means to stay up all night. That's the most painful thing. It doesn't, for some reason, that's not one of the suggestions here. There's going to be a bunch of suggestions, but we have to come out with that it's referring to not eating. So it says, Tano, it's not just saying you should afflict your soul. Maybe it means you have to sit in the sun and sit in the cold, sit in the freezer. So that you should be pained. So it says, no, don't do work. Now, what did that tell me? So just like don't do work on Yom Kippur is passive. Also, the affliction is a passive affliction. So you have to go out into the sun and, step on needles or something. It's not an active affliction, it's a passive affliction. Maybe, if he's sitting in the sun, we don't tell him that you're allowed to get up and go sit in the shade. Or maybe if he's sitting in the shade and it's getting very cold, you don't tell him go to the sun. Be passive. You should afflict your soul. Passive. Once you're there, you should do it passive. It says Dumi de Malacha. No, it has to be similar to work. Just like work, it doesn't matter what situation you were in before. It's equal across the board. So too, when it comes to affliction, it has to be equal across. You can't say that it's only an affliction for someone that's already there. He's the one that has to do this. He has to stay there. No, we're looking for an affliction that's across the board. Tanidach, we have another brisa. Tanos nafshi seichem should afflict his soul. Yochel yeshu b'chama v'tzina v'yitzdan. Maybe a person should sit in the sun, sit in the cold, and be pained. Tamalayim v'chal malach leisasa. Says all work you shouldn't do. Ma malach davar shechayal nav'makom acher. Just like work is prohibited in other places as well. What work? Shabbos. Af inu nefesh shechayal nav'makom acher. Also, the affliction of the soul has to have another prohibition somewhere else, and on Yom Kippur you're not allowed to do it either. That's what we're looking for. What is it? Where do you have the prohibition somewhere else, and on Yom Kippur you're not allowed to do it? It's a pigel v'naisa. Not allowed to eat those two prohibited foods. Pigel is a sacrifice that was invalidated because of the person's thoughts, and also nicer, leftover sacrifice. You're not allowed to eat it. So you know what? On Yom Kippur you're not allowed to eat pigel and nicer. Avi pigel v'naisa and bekars le'avos tevel shein and bekars. How do you know you're not allowed to eat tevel? Tevel doesn't have kars. Tevel is grain that was untied. It says a double expression. You should afflict your soul, and your soul should be afflicted. Reba, it's coming to include also this grain. Avi tevel shubamisa, that has a big punishment, death penalty from heaven. But what about non-kosher animals, a carcass of an animal that wasn't shechted? How do you know that that's also prohibited on Yom Kippur? We have the extra verse. How do you know you're not allowed to eat regular food? So far, we only know prohibited foods. We have the extra verse. Okay, so you can't eat regular foods, but maybe truma is a mitzvah to eat. Maybe you're allowed to eat truma on Yom Kippur. You have the extra verse. Truma, I know it's a mitzvah to eat. Doesn't mean I have to eat it right away. I could eat it tomorrow. But kachim, a sacrifice, maybe I should be allowed to eat it today because it's a mitzvah. I'm not allowed to leave it over. We have the extra verse. You know what? If you don't like what I'm saying, I have another source for you. says that that soul will be lost, that will be cut off. What would cut off a soul? What would cause that? Not eating and not drinking. So it must be that Inoi, the Inoi Nefesh, affliction of the soul, is referring to fasting, not eating and not drinking. Why do you need the second source to say that the punishment is Vavadatiach Nefshehi? The person would die. The person was cut off. What would cause the person to die? That would be eating and drinking. Why do you need this extra source? You had all the extra sources before, extra verses. It says, I could have thought that when it says Tanus Nafshesechem, it's talking about not to have relations. So I would have said like this: I need an affliction that causes death. Affliction of not having marital relations does not cause death. A person doesn't die because he didn't have relations. A person could die, God forbid, because he didn't eat. So this tells me that it's referring to food. The affliction of Yom Kippur is referring to food. Okay, let's stop at the Beis Rabbi Shmuel Tana.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Tzlacha.